Namaste. A warm welcome to all the viewers present here. An interaction with Ms. Aarti C. Rajaratnam on the topic Understanding Teenagers and Supporting Them the Right Way. On behalf of Prakramika Institute, I, Gayatri Narsiman, welcome you all for this session. Yesterday, we had a beautiful interaction with Ms. Aarti, and there were a lot of parents participating regarding how best we can understand the teenagers in the right way from their perspective also, and what are the common mistakes we as parents do and how we can rectify that. Since both of us being the therapist, we don't want to disclose the identity and the personal problems which were discussed yesterday in yesterday's platform. We would like to have a quick brief about the whole episode of yesterday, and we will be having a couple of questions, important questions to be shared also. Now, with this, I pass the Zoom floor to Ms. Aarti for a brief of yesterday's session. Over to you, Ms. Aarti.
Thank you, Gayatri, and thank you for the opportunity to share. So yesterday, I had introduced everybody to, and what I will be introducing you to now is called the ABCDE model of working with teenagers. And what I endeavor to do through this is for us to understand where to support children, how to support them, how to understand them, and how to make changes both within ourselves and in our relationship with them so that we are able to optimize their potential and also build the relationship that we share with them. So starting with the A stands for accepting adolescence. Now, many times when parents reach out for counseling, we notice that what they're actually bringing up as a problem is what is expected of a normal teenager. So in this, I have three parts. First is the growth spurt and the related changes. The second is the emotional regulation and how we understand that. And the third, the most, which is the identity crisis or the identity change that they have. So in this, in the growth spurt, the first that you can anticipate are hormonal changes. Of course, we all know that there's testosterone and there's progesterone, but what do these do? They contribute towards a huge mood swing pattern in many of our children, especially because their lifestyle now, especially staying indoors and not having sufficient physical activity, not having sufficient social interaction with their peer group, we notice that this has become quite a difficult thing. Apart from this, of course, there are these acne related problems, skin, hair, body changes, which they are not able to adjust with and not able to accept. So what can I do as a parent? Now I need to understand when there are hormonal changes, there will be physical changes, which the child awkwardly fits into. So my role here is not to shame them, especially not body shame them or make fun of their appearance. Second, if I can, sit with them, speak to them about the changes in the body. And there are also lovely videos available online on how this can be enabled, how we can support our children to understand and accept their body and the hormonal changes in the most scientific way. And third, more importantly, how we can bring about lifestyle changes. Simple things that I normally suggest to parents. Boys require about 350 minutes of physical activity per week to be able to regulate the changes in the body. And girls require about 250 minutes per week to be able to do the same with progesterone. Now, when this happens, what happens to the body is that it beautifully starts adapting to the environment and to the internal changes. And the mood swings are not as severe as we would see them when the lifestyle is unhealthy. And when I mention body image, it's a change that we see outside. We see that the body of the teenager is suddenly changing, going through major changes. But the teenager inside feels that they don't look good enough, especially because they have Instagram posts of people who put perfectly Photoshopped pictures. And, those ideal images are something that many teenagers think they have to become. But rarely are able to do so. Our role as parents here will be to help them adapt to this and help them understand that they are beautiful as they are. And this is where body shaming and making fun of their appearance is something that we should stop doing. One of the most common practices is having nicknames that are built around how they look, whether they're too tall or too fat or too dark or too fair or whatever. So if you have any such practices, the best thing to do is to stop right now and help your teenager understand that their body is beautiful as it is. The second, of course, is emotional regulation. And I probably speak about it so much, but the simplest thing that I would like for you to understand as a parent, the emotional part of the body of the brain rather, tends to work a lot more, is unable to immediately take whatever is an emotional trigger and be able to regulate it through the thought process and balance it out. And this is going to happen till the person is about 20, 24, 26 years old, between 24 and 26 years old. Knowing that these changes are quite normal, I need to understand that I can't afford to trigger the teenager emotionally and then expect them to, come back to normal within 24 hours. Many times children keep ruminating about the emotional fallout with you. So I can give you an example of a child who felt the teacher was extremely partial and then dropped in studies because she was unable to take away all those emotions built into that. So what can I do as a parent when the teenager has this? One, be a little proactive, try not to trigger them off, by saying things. Yes, we do feel angry, but in that anger, when we shout at them or we say things or we upset them, we are able to come out of it because our brain is still able to regulate and move into the thinking part. For the teenager's brain, because it's still a developing brain, that doesn't happen so naturally. So what we can do is at the proactive level, not trigger them. Second, if I have triggered them, please do make sure that you apologize. In fact, I mentioned in the session yesterday, sorry is the beginning of a new conversation. It's not the end of the conflict, but the beginning of building a relationship. The third aspect of what we need to do here is co-regulate, meaning understanding that the child has been triggered. I stay in my calm so that their storm is sort of reduced and it comes into our calm and we're able to build a healthy relationship around it. The third area which I wanted to talk about is identity. Most teenagers tend to move away from family towards the peer group because they're building their identity. Second, they believe that an imaginary audience exists and is looking at them all the time. They will always build a personal fable where they are the hero or the heroine of their story, and they will build up narratives around it. They will have hypocritical thought. They'll have one set of rules for themselves, one set of rules for you, and there will be a lot of hypocrisy in the way they behave and the way they interact with people. But all this is the way in which they're making sense of their world. Please don't try to put them down for all of this. Continue to model a very balanced lifestyle, because when they see that you remain balanced, it becomes a good way for them to learn how to shape their identity while they're finding their own skills and resources. So this is the first aspect, which is accepting adolescence. Now the second, which is B, is boundaries and bonding. And of course, boundaries and bonding are very important because relationships form the core of whatever we are doing on earth, right? So the activity that I taught them is from my book, Parenting Inner Sense to Inner Sense, where I taught parents how to help children understand their relationships. So this has 4 circles. We help children to draw circles on a piece of paper and help them understand that the first circle is called the touching circle or the circle of trust. And I allow people in this circle when I trust them very much and I allow touch. And by touch, I mean emotional touch or the power to hurt me, and also physical touch, which can also mean a sexual touch. Now, why this is very important is the personal space belongs only to me, and I don't allow anybody in my touching circle if I don't trust them, and I will not allow touch. The second circle is the good friend circle or the circle of friends. And in this circle, I allow people who I trust, but I will not allow touch, both emotional and physical touch. And this is the circle where I have close friendships, but I don't have people who are capable of hurting me. The third circle is the okay people, or the people that I interact with, the acquaintances as we would call them. I meet them, I speak with them, I interact on a daily basis sometimes, but there is no trust or no touch. And these people are just people, and they have no impact on my life except for the fact that we interact on a daily basis. And the fourth circle being the most important, which I call the strangers circle. And the stranger circle is important because these would be for relatives or family friends sometimes who I know are capable of hurting me, but we do tend to interact with them because there is a social obligation to do so. So there is a gossipy neighbor, for example, or a person who's extremely hurtful. They are the people that I put in my stranger circle. I keep them at that distance so that they don't have the power to hurt me. When children are taught how to keep people in the right distance and have the right kind of boundaries, it helps them to build healthy relationships. Unfortunately, what happens is we model that whenever you're happy and excited in a relationship, bring them into your touching circle. But we don't do that. How we teach teenagers to do this, help them to put people in the right circle. When I meet someone, I get to know them at least for a year before I bring them to the touching circle. Because when I observe somebody in different situations over a period of time, I know if they are trustworthy enough to bring them into my touching circle. And also, as a result of that, I'm able to build healthier relationships. I'm able to change my own patterns in relationships. So this was the activity that I had taught the parents in the session. But if you're more interested in reading up about this, you can, of course, find it in my book. But the rules I've already mentioned here. The second aspect of the boundaries and bonding that I talked about is how this age teenagers require the peer influence more than anything else. They will be in cliques. They need to be in small groups. They will have their secret language. They may dress alike. They may want to speak to each other every day, interact on an everyday basis. And the COVID crisis has probably challenged this thing in a very, very big way. Girls need to talk it out, and boys need to move and, sort of physically regulate this. And this is something very normal for this. In fact, a lot of researchers in the West have shown us how when teenagers don't have the right kind of peer interaction or the kind of supportive peer interaction in cliques, they do go in for depression-like states, and it's very, very difficult for them. So as a parent, it's very important for us to understand that we need to encourage our children to find friends. It's not the number of friends, but the quality of the clique that is most important. So when the teenager comes and tells you, my group is not speaking to me, or I feel very lonely, it means that there is a problem in that peer interaction. And our role may be to understand how we can support them. Don't rush to become your teenager's friend, because they don't need friends in your age group. They need friends in their own age group to be able to go through life. The third area, which I spoke about in boundaries and bonding, is bullying, cyberbullying, especially, where many of our children are getting trolled by even strangers. And also the fact that there is a lot of peer pressure, that I have to keep up with some other people to be accepted and liked. Now, usually these two are worked out when their family relationships are built very well. When I have a safe space in my home environment where I have a model for healthy relationships, I don't become prey to so much of peer pressure. And if there is bullying, I have the power to come back and speak to my parents. What you can do as parents, set some guidelines for your child about what sites they can use and cannot use. And if needed, you can also monitor the sites that your child goes on to be able to protect them from the trolling and the cyberbullying aspect of it. Second, when your child complains of being threatened by somebody on the online space, please do take action, because many of these things are quite dangerous, because fake IDs are used by a lot of people, and the child feels extremely threatened and things like that. So please take those complaints very seriously, instead of reprimanding your child, saying, why did you go onto that site? I told you not to do it. Because if you start reprimanding, they'll stop coming to you for support. And at time like this, actually our support means a lot more. So I hope that makes sense. The third was C, which is communication and connection. And this is my favorite aspect of the whole program. So it's in the heart of the program. So it's the C, it's the center. So I think probably since the lockdown and since I started doing webinars, I've been talking about communication, or rather connection ritual, almost on an everyday basis, meaning set aside at least 15 minutes to spend with your child. It's called a connection ritual because the whole idea of it is to connect with your child. And the connection ritual is done on an everyday basis. And you do it to build the relationship with your child. It must be an activity that both of you enjoy. So you could play shuttle together, you can go out for a walk, you can cook together, you can find some baking or something that you enjoy doing together. It can be any activity both of you enjoy. It should not be something only one person enjoys and the other person doesn't, and they go along with it. And it cannot be involving a gadget. Both of us sat and watched TV. That can never be a connection ritual. The idea of the connection ritual is to create a safe space in the relationship where I feel respected enough, loved enough, and I'm able to connect with my parent or with my child. And this becomes the bridge upon which all other aspects of our relationship can be built. Many times parents come and say, ma'am, earlier he used to tell me a lot of things. Now he's very secretive. That's because the connection ritual has not been built. So when you start building, it takes time. Okay, many parents think that 3 days I'll do it, fourth day everything will be fine. Sometimes it takes up to a month to be able to build that trust, because in many of our interactions, when we've been very unreasonable as adults, we tend to break that trust that the child has. And so to build back trust, we need to be able to show them that we've genuinely changed and we genuinely want to connect. Now, don't get into the connection ritual with a hidden agenda. I want to change my child's gadget addiction, so let me do this connection ritual so that I can connect. Because when children see this ulterior agenda that you have, the connection rituals fall apart and you'll never be able to build it again. It becomes becomes very, very difficult. So tread very carefully, tread with genuine intentions of wanting to build the relationship with your child and not just change one aspect of their behavior. That's extremely important. The second is, of course, communication and how we communicate with children. I actually wrote these set of rules when the boys' locker room incident happened in Delhi and there was a lot of problems. So the rules are very, very simple. Now, when you want to communicate with your teenager, please let them know at least 24 hours in advance that you want to speak to them. Don't suddenly barge into the room and say, sit, I need to talk to you. Because the moment you do that, you put them in the cortisol or stress response, and they're unable to react or respond to your points of view. So let them know that you're going to speak the next day, say at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, something that's comfortable for both of you. Both of you need to be alert and communicative. Second, let them know what the topic is and what you wish to talk about. Let them also have those 24 hours to prepare themselves well in advance so that you can have a healthy discussion where both of you have your points prepared. And then let the child go first. Let the child speak first. Let him or her have their point of view first. Listen to what they have to say. If there is something healthy in what they are saying, and if there is something that is right in what they are saying, please make sure that you bring about that and say, I like this point that you said. I'd like to make this change in my life. Because the moment you model that you're listening and you're willing to change, you're also letting the child know, when there is something reasonable that my father or my mother is saying, I can also change, and it's a safe space to do that. The most important, if it's a boy, please walk with them or move around and speak. If it's a girl, don't sit face to face, sit beside your girl, don't make eye contact. Have a casual chat like you would do with a friend. What this does is it helps the teenager to process the internal message and not so much just the instructions that may be coming with you. And the most important, always follow it up within a week, because we usually do this one time talking to the child and expect that change will happen for life. Nothing works that way. You need to follow it up again, have another healthy discussion using the same format. So what happens is, when there is a consistency in the way you are communicating with the child also understands this is how communication is done healthily in a relationship that matters. Anything of value takes time to build, so we need to exercise a lot of patience as we go through this. The third, the most important aspect of communication and connection. And if you see, for all three parts, I said the most important, because in a relationship, connection and communication become the core. In this, there is co-regulation, which I had given an example earlier, and most important, problem solving. Whenever your child comes to you and shares something or tells you, they're not expecting a solution from you. All they're expecting is that you will have a supportive ear and that you will listen non-judgmentally. So when your child comes and tells you, I'm having this problem in school, or somebody spoke about me this way, listen. And then ask them a question: how would you like me to support you? How would you like me to play a role in this? Because if they don't want you to play a role, they will tell you, no, ma, I just wanted to tell you. No, ma, I just wanted to tell you. But if they want your support, they can tell you, I'm feeling very low, or I don't know, but I just want to talk to you. Sometimes listen in silence, and then together, work towards the solution. You can ask them, okay, how do you think this can be solved? Okay, don't ask questions like, why did you do this? Why did that person? Why questions never yield the answer. But how can we? When you use that as the beginning of the sentence, it starts helping the child understand that he or she is not alone, that you're going to be able to support them through this process. So help them through this process of brainstorming together for solutions, but don't rush to solve it. Let them go test it, let them go work on it and say, ma, we discussed this worked, but this did not work. So at that point, you can ask, what do you think we need to change in this situation? So when you start just putting questions and letting them know that we are doing it together, the child starts feeling more confident to try new solutions or new ways to deal with the problem. So that was the C and all the rules in the C. The D is my most important message, which is called the dopamine detox. I've written extensively about it and worked a lot in that. Dopamine is the pleasure-seeking chemical or neurotransmitter in the brain. When I read a book, I get a small amount of dopamine. When I study for an exam and get good marks, I get dopamine in my brain. I can also get dopamine for going on to Instagram and getting many followers, many likes, and also while I'm binge watching movies online. So any activity that I find pleasurable can give me dopamine. Now, for a teenager, the need for dopamine is much higher, and their tolerance also tends to be higher, which means any negative habit that's brought into a teenager, they tend to get addicted faster, which is why we need to be extremely careful. And by saying this, what I'm also trying to tell us is the gadget culture that we've introduced our children to is one of the most dangerous things. Because, I know of teenagers who've been online, hooked onto games for 24 hours, needing de-addiction and things like that. So I give you a simple set of rules. Please, before you give the gadget to the child, have some ground rules. What is it that I can do and cannot do with this? So you have to have these clearly set, because all of us are new to gadgets. Our generation did not have gadgets when we were growing up. As a result, when we are introducing it to our children, we need to set some ground rules. Second, more important, is that you need to make sure that all the passwords for the Wi-Fi and everything are in your control. It's an extremely important step to take, because many of our children do get stuck in pornography and all those things without their knowledge initially. These are all gateways to other difficult states of addiction. So please be very, very aware. I teach something called the dopamine detox, which is once a week, absolutely no gadgets for anybody in the family. Why we need to do this is, when we remove it completely and all of us allow our brains to feel bored sometimes, it helps to regularize the dopamine levels. In fact, some people call it even dopamine fasting. There's a lot of information about that online. You can read it. But what it does is, like, if I keep eating only exotic food every day, and then there is the curd rice or a dal rice, I feel very bored eating that meal. Similarly, when I've had only exciting things on the screen, I'm unable to use that screen for online learning. I'm unable to use it for just normal things. So I get very distracted when I go on to online learning, or if I have to sit and focus on a class. So keeping all this in mind, one of the simple things we can model for children is to keep gadgets away unless they are extremely useful. I mean, we've all survived without even phones many years back, right? So suddenly, I don't know why all of us have broken our boundaries and allowed people to access us from work 24 hours. None of us are emergency services, I'm sure. Okay, and if you're emergency service, of course you can have your phone, but most of us can actually switch off our phones after a certain point in the day and be accessible to the family and build relationships. If we can model that, that will be the best form of dopamine detox that we can give to our children. The last, of course, is working with examinations. I've given simple tips on how we can support our children. So the first rule, when you get them to sit, please let them sit in the same place every day, because when the brain decides this is my place for study, it'll start becoming ready to study when it gets to that place. And that place must never be the bed or the dining table, because they're the most distractive places. Second, never let them face a window, a door, an entire room. Let them face a plain wall. It can be any color when they sit down to study. Third rule, eat the frog, as I told them. Let the child grade their chapters or their subjects in order of difficulty. Difficult one first, easy one last. Let them always start with what they find difficult and challenging and go towards what they find very, very easy. The fourth was the ABCD rule, the ABCD within the ABCD, I said. So what is the ABCD? So if the child has 10 tasks to do in the day, teach them that A is the priority given for what is most important and needs to be done immediately. B is the importance given for something that's important but finished after A. C is what is nice but not important. Okay, so chatting with a friend when I have work to do or I have a deadline to catch up with is nice, but it's not important. D is not my work, it has to be delegated. And E is what has to be eliminated. If children learn to prioritize their work as A, B, C, D, E every day, they are in a better position to plan their day with regard to studies. Most important, find out if your child is an owl or a lark. Are they people who study well in the night? Are they people who study well in the early morning? Based on that, let them plan their sleep schedule, support them to have at least 6 to 8 hours of regular sleep, irrespective of whether they study at night or early in the morning. Nobody can do work both in the night and early in the morning, because the brain doesn't work that way. And of course, give them brain breaks. A little bit of study, 10 to 15 minutes of study, and a short 1 to 2 minute break. 15 minutes of study, 1 to 2 minute break. And that 1 to 2 minutes can be physical activity, can be a small chat, can be just a small break where the child can do something else. No gadget at that time, but some just basic focus. And I normally suggest activities from Brain Gym, or just a simple breathing technique or something like that, where there is a body awareness component involved, so that the child is able to focus back. So the second aspect in that was balance. balanced diet, most important, balanced sleep habits, balance and recreation. Because when just because they're in 9th standard, 10th standard, 11th standard, 12th standard, you take away all the recreation and hobbies and expect them to study all day, the brain cannot work that way. They need to have their recreation, they need to have their social interaction, like I mentioned earlier. And the last balance is to also be able to balance their studies, balancing difficult subjects with what they find easy. When they're able to balance this, children find it easier to work with the exams. And the last part of the E was the kind of feedback that you and I can give as parents. So whenever they come with their mark sheets, as much as possible, sit with them and ask, how do you think I can support you to learn better? Can I switch off the TV and sit with you so that you don't feel distracted? These kind of small questions that you can ask. Or you can say, see, I saw the answer sheet and I noticed that you've done very well in these type of questions, but in these type of questions it looks like you find some difficulty. Should we find some solutions together? So this kind of feedback, when you give it to them, this child realizes my parents understand I'm putting in my best effort, but at the same time they're willing to help me to be able to overcome these difficulties. So when you understand the ABCD, accepting that some changes are normal and that I shouldn't fight those battles. Second, set healthy boundaries, model healthy boundaries, and make way for bonding, and understand when they have problems, I need to step up. Connection and communication, I've elaborated on that very well. And the fourth, of course, is dopamine detox, being able to take away the things that excite the brain, but don't give them the balance required to be able to lead a healthy or a balanced life. And the last, of course, how we can help them with examinations. So I hope, Gayatri, that I was able to cover all the points, and probably you can take a question, or we could sort of, give it the closure that we want to.
Beautifully explained. Beautifully explained. And it's always nice to hear from you again and again also. And one question which I would like to ask you on behalf of all the parents comprising the whole the episode yesterday. Uh, some challenges faced by parents. Of course, I do agree. As a parent, we also do a mistake by giving them the gadgets without the rule, without that framework, as you said. Now, when we have done that mistake, how are we to rectify that mistake? This is the most common problem faced by parents. Should we remove the gadgets? Can we remove it instantly, or is there a procedure how we can go about with it? And the next is the child keeps postponing the studies. She doesn't want to do it every day. There is no, as you said, balance in that, and she's always inclined towards gadgets. So how do we make them balance? And one important question which was asked is there was no obedience. They don't obey us. Children don't obey parents. So how do we address to these?
Right. So the first thing, Gayatri, I'll take the third question first because it's the obedience aspect. Any healthy relationship is between two equal people. So the moment I am going to be able to use, I'm going to be using violence, force, or control or power, I'm going to be inviting a power struggle, because already they're going through their identity change. So when I say you have to obey me, I'm actually putting so much pressure on the child, and the child is going to fight back with the same power. So there's going to be no way in which there will be a change. Instead, what needs to happen, like I mentioned, working on the connection ritual and the communication pattern where the relationship is built. Because, when I love somebody, I will want to do this. Now, for example, if I don't like you, if you call me for this session, I'll just say, Gayatri, I'm very busy, I don't have time, or something like that. But since we do share like a healthy relationship, though we don't speak every day or something, we respect each other as professionals in the field, and we're able to work. So whenever you have that trust established in somebody, you will make time, you will put in that effort. So if the parent is finding that the child is not listening, somewhere that has to be built, instead of trying to control more. Because the more you control, the more there will be a power struggle and becomes a problem. The second aspect of postponing, procrastinating. See, many children who have been given gadgets without a structure always will find this very difficult, because they've never developed habits. See, and also they've never had to face any kind of consequences as a result of that. So the first thing I would sit with this child, again, connection is most important, because for anything of value to be built, a connection is required. I need to have a healthy relationship upon which change can be built. Change cannot happen overnight, right? So change has to be built on something that is solid. It's like a foundation for the relationship. So I need to first connect with my child and then say, I understand that you don't want to study every day. I know that probably sitting 3 hours every day and studying is not meaningful for you, but let's start with 20 minutes or half an hour. I will also put aside all my work. I will bring a book. I will also sit and read. or I will work on these areas. Let's together work on this. So this is where, the co-regulation component also comes in. Initially, there will be a little bit of resistance and all that, but, just be very gentle, but at the same time, very firm, letting them know, but I think we need to set this habit, because the portions that you are taking responsibility for your exams require everyday work. Because, there is a beautiful story of Napoleon Bonaparte. Apparently, after he won a particular war, he called his general and he said, I want to give a medal of courage to the most soldier who fought the best yesterday. So then, the general went and he brought two soldiers and he said, these two people fought very bravely. And so, sir, you decide who gets the medal. So Napoleon looked at both of them and he asked the general, what did they do the day after the war? Okay. One guy went and got drunk. The other guy came back for practice. So he said, give the medal to the one who came back for practice, because it's not for those highlight moments that we live. We live for the ordinary moments where we practice. So it's a very important habit that we inculcate in children, that even if I don't have something to perform for, I have certain duties or responsibilities which I will take part in. And it need not be for 3 hours or 7 hours. It's for that 20 minutes. What I did today in my online classes, I just revise in the evening, make notes or make a mind map. It can just be as simple as that. Just pick up key points, just make an acronym so that I can process it later. So small processing of information needs to be done every day for anybody who's studying, for anyone who's considered a student. Now, I've been working for almost 22 years, but I still learn every day. And I make time every day to read or to update myself in my field, because it's very important. Life is dynamic, and so I need to make time to be able to do that. And that habit is something that I need to co-regulate with my child. And if you don't have that habit of updating, children will also not have it. So at that point, you'll need to work. And the most important question about your gadget addiction, I think every parent probably asked about it yesterday. So the first thing, like I already mentioned, the connection part of it is very important. I almost sound like, those old LP records that will keep going around singing the same song. But without connection, change cannot happen. Because, when I have high dopamine, the two other neurotransmitters that can help me change that habit are endorphins, which come from exercise, through laughter, okay, when I move. So that can be one of the things. The second is, of course, oxytocin, which comes when I feel extreme love with a person, right? And both are not brought in. I bring only control, which is cortisol, which is the stress hormone, saying, no, I'm telling you, you have to listen. So if you bought the gadget, you also take responsibility for it, right? You can't say, he asked me, I bought it. Now he has to know how to use it. Their brain is not yet ready to make that kind of dimensional shift. So if you've brought the gadget and you've given it without the rules, please take the responsibility of the consequences and start building the relationships so that you will be able to bring about the change. That's the first. Responsibility comes first. Second, modeling. You need to model how the gadget has to be used. If you're also sitting, okay, tell me, I'm listening to you, then the child is also going to do the same thing. If you are going to use your gadget only for work, the child will also realize it's used only for work. But you're all the time entertaining yourself, you're all the time wasting time with the gadget and not spending time, not bonding, child is also going to do the same thing. So modeling is very important. Thirdly, sit down with them and work on how much time is okay. Okay, let them come up with this, which is when you have to find out from them, is there really a usage and things like that. So yesterday I was speaking to my nephew, and he has all his online classes. He just joined college this year. All his classes unfortunately are online, but he said, tomorrow I have 3 Zoom calls. One is with my school classmates, we are having a reunion. The second one is with my college classmates, which I'm meeting now outside the class setting, but on Zoom. And the third is a meeting that he's having a church service in the morning. So he said, all 3 are very important for me. So today I'm going to finish all my studies. So he was off screens yesterday and he did all his studies. So I'm just giving you an example of how children will know how to regulate, because they know that we are supporting them. So when you have healthy habits, children will usually be able to regulate. When we don't have those regulatory mechanisms, because he also sees that nobody else in the house uses screens unnecessarily, right? So when that model is set at home, children also start realizing that I can change my lifestyle and still have good time. And this is very important. So that's where, again, I come back to the point that relationships are most important. If the relationship is healthy, changing gadget addiction becomes so much easier. If the relationship is controlling, is reprimanding, is punitive, is filled with models who don't understand how change takes place, children will pick up that. So I think if you really would like a behavior in your child, please see if you have it first. If you don't have it first, I don't think it's ever going to reflect in your child. So I hope that answers the question.
Perfectly. Nailed it, I should say. Changes begin from us. We have to start changing to bring the change in others. So that was beautifully explained, Ms. Aarti, particularly the responsibility, how we have to play as a role model, on how we have to sit together and plan for them. So the way we have to be a supportive parent is beautifully explained. I wish people who are watching this, let us start the change from us so that we can bring the change in our children and help them achieve better in their life. So with this, on behalf of Prakramika, I sincerely thank Ms. Aarti for sharing her knowledge, her expertise, her experience. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to share, and I hope this helps a lot of parents. Thank you.
Thank you.